দর্শক আমন্ত্রণ আরটিভি নিয়মিত আলোচনা অনুষ্ঠান ফোর্থরাইটে। এই অনুষ্ঠানে আমরা কথা বলি বিভিন্ন সেক্টরের বিশেষজ্ঞদের সাথে, যারা বাংলাদেশ নিয়ে ভবিষ্যৎ পরিকল্পনা ও তাদের অভিজ্ঞতা নিয়ে আলোচনা করেন। গেল 6 মাসে বিশ্ব সংবাদ মাধ্যমের বড় অংশই দখল করে রেখেছে করোনা ভাইরাস। বিআইডিএস বলছে করোনা পরিস্থিতির কারণে 13% মানুষ কাজ হারিয়েছেন, ফলে করোনায় ব্যক্তিখাত ক্ষতিগ্রস্ত হয়েছে সবচেয়ে বেশি। এর বাইরে মানব জীবন সংশ্লিষ্ট বিভিন্ন বিষয় রয়েছে। আজ কথা বলবো করোনায় জনজীবনের সার্বিক প্রতিফলন নিয়ে। আপনাদের সঙ্গে আছে আমি সৈয়দ আশিক রহমান। আজকের বিষয় দ্য ইম্প্যাক্ট অফ কোভিড-19 হিউম্যান সিকিউরিটি পার্সপেক্টস। আর এই বিষয়ে আলোচনার জন্য আমাদের সঙ্গে যুক্ত হয়েছেন জাতিসংঘের খাদ্য কৃষি বিষয়ক সংস্থা FAOর কান্ট্রি রিপ্রেজেন্টেটিভ রবার্ট সিমসন এবং আন্তর্জাতিক সংস্থা ব্র্যাকের নির্বাহী পরিচালক আসিফ সালেহ। থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ Mr. Robert and Asif for joining with us. Well, firstly, I would like to start with Robert. According to the FAO, food production and food stock may fall in the next market year in Bangladesh, especially rice and cereal because of the coronavirus pandemic. What Bangladesh must do?
Thank you very much. And first of all, let me start by saying it's a great pleasure to be here and with my colleague Asif. Fortunately, we can't be together in the studio, but it's good to see you from a distance as well. This is a great question. It's a question that FAO gets all over the world as well as here in Bangladesh. But in Bangladesh specifically, when you talk about the staples like rice, maize, wheat, all of these are in inadequate supply at this point in time. There's been a very strong Boro harvest rice, which is about 6.5% larger than last year. The price of rice at farm gate, it's true, it's been a little bit elevated, but this has also served to help stir additional production and demand for production of rice, which is also beneficial to all the consumers on the market here. So at this point in time, I don't think there's a huge concern in terms of rice production or staples. The big concern comes when countries close their borders to rice trade, or they're concerned about global impacts or global shortages and that sort of thing. And then that starts to impact all countries in an artificial way. And so that's one of the messages that we try to convey to all governments, is to avoid that sort of panic behavior.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Asif Saleh. COVID-19 is not proportionately impacting women as existing gender inequalities. In your view, what is the reason behind?
Thanks for having both of us, and it's a pleasure to be in RTV after a long time. I used to host a show long
Exactly.
time ago in RTV 10 years ago. Yeah, Road to Democracy. I did a few episodes.
Our viewers also missed your show.
Yeah.
They're missing still.
It's thank you. I mean, it's a much different reality now, and you're absolutely right to point out that this pandemic. And particularly post-pandemic recovery has to be very, very sensitive towards the gender aspect, because what we are seeing in all the aspects, like we typically happens in any big disasters, like women who are typically marginalized even gets more marginalized because of the crisis. And that's what we are seeing in all the surveys that are coming through, whether it's in education, the early signs are that girls are likely to be dropped out of education more and more. Whether it's in violence at home, domestic violence have gone up during the long lockdown. Then there are economic reality. We see that in garments factories there are layoffs have started, and women are disproportionately getting laid off in these areas. So it's coming from all different dimensions, both home and abroad, home and outside, that women are going to be one of the worst sufferers of this crisis. So any sort of recovery effort that we take on after this going forward has to really keep that in mind, that it has to be gender sensitive. It has to be keeping women at the center, because they are suffering the most.
Many thanks, Asif Saleh, for remembering your presence at RTV. It's your generosity. Well, Mr. Robert, can you give us an idea of the growing direct impact that COVID-19 is having on Asia, with special regard to food and agriculture? What are the current projections for the near future?
Yes, thank you. Again, a very good question. And we shouldn't underestimate the threat and the impacts of COVID-19. Clearly, some of the really clear damages have been to livelihoods, and my colleague Asif has already pointed some of this out, how it's impacting in gender areas. It's also potentially having a huge impact on undernourishment and vitamin intake, nutritional challenges to people. And one of the areas that we're looking at most is some of these lockdowns have caused a requirement for people to stay home, and some of the day laborers aren't working as much. There's been a real economic impact, which is putting a number of a percentage of the population, which I think Asif is best placed to speak on, because Brock has done some remarkable research in this area. So I'll leave these numbers to my colleague, but it's pushing a lot of people back into poverty. And this is, not only is this having a challenge on the food basket or the nutritional basket that one can consume, it also has impacts on the demand for agriculture products. And we're seeing, in the lockdown period, we saw a massive decrease in the demand of things like milk, dairy products, meat, poultry, et cetera, et cetera. We also saw challenges because people were afraid to spread this disease, we saw challenges in the labor markets. There was a shortage of labor. We had to push very quickly for mechanization in terms of rice harvesting. And I congratulate the Ministry of Agriculture, who did a tremendous job in our areas of bringing in the rice crop before the floods came and all that. So some of the food security issues are really in thanks to their reactions to this. We look at this as poverty potentially increases, those that have assets at home, like cattle farmers and such, they're tempted to sell off their valuable assets in terms of moving forward. But we end up with, if we can't turn this around, we're going to see trends of increasing not just daily income challenges, but poverty of the household. Less resources to get by on day to day. We're going to see nutritional challenges, and we'll see challenges in terms of transport and access to inputs, which could have longer term global agriculture production challenges. And these are some of the global messages that both the Food and Agriculture Organization, but also our sister partners in Rome, the World Food Program, and EFOD have been pushing, that we need to keep agriculture demand up, but also production high. Demand for production has to be there, or we'll suffer nutritional challenges.
Appreciated, Robert, for clarifying. Mr. Asif Saleh, would you like to add on nutritional challenges? Moreover, according to the recent survey, more than 100 million people in the country are at risk of economic and health problems due to the novel coronavirus. How does BRAC work on this?
This is the biggest challenge, that some of the jobs that have been lost are not going to come back. And so we have to look at newer opportunities that are coming up. I mean, not every crisis also brings up opportunities. But in terms of sheer numbers, it is a very serious situation, because as we saw that, we are doing month-to-month surveys, and our survey in June showed there was a slight improvement from May in terms of people getting back to some form of livelihood. But our May data showed that we had almost our ultra poor, sort of the people living under poverty line, jumped from sort of about 18% to almost close to 40% over just a few weeks. So that was a huge drop, and the urban, particularly the urban poor, who were living on daily wages, they were the worst sufferers. And the economy still hasn't moved back up into the full cycles, and particularly some areas like restaurant, hospitality, and others, they haven't opened up. So these jobs are unlikely to come back into full force. So we will need to have a very thoughtful sort of recovery. For us, but from the BRAC side, what we tried to do in the initial phase is that we tried to provide some emergency cash support. We supported almost close to about 360,000 households, both from our own resources and also we're working with various development partners and private sector. That's something, as you know, even before the pandemic, we had a huge number of young population in this country, huge unemployed graduates in this country. So after the pandemic, things have deteriorated even further. So now the question is, the vocational training has to be popularized and has to be in areas where the newer kinds of demands are emerging. And these new areas, just to name a few, are of course a digitalization area, the IT jobs. These are coming because of the pandemic. As you know, a lot of companies have gone fully digital and others. And there are also a lot of jobs are being created in the health sector. So if we can create some of these opportunities there, I think we need to be, we can sort of convert this into opportunity for people as well.
Well, thank you, Asif Saleh. Well, Mr. Robert, is FAO able to continue its work under the circumstances? And if so, what are some of the things you and your team are doing differently?
Interesting question. FAO has been supporting the Bangladesh government for over 40 years now, and the people of Bangladesh in improving and adapting their agriculture to the current circumstances. And really admire the government of Bangladesh to move from back in their independence in 1971 to a situation of food dependence on international support to now being food secure. I think they're maintaining this through this crisis. There's a tremendous vote of confidence to the government for achieving this. And FAO does, in fact, continue to work. We've done this for 40 years. We won't let the pandemic stop us. We put our hat in the ring and provide the support that's required. So some of the areas that we have been continuing to support on are focusing on supply chain actions. In other words, keeping supply chains open and keeping supply chains shortened. And part of doing this is, for example, we have a project where we work with a number of different agriculture associations. We help them create call centers during the extended public holiday period where they were able to contact their input suppliers and also contact the buyers down the line from their work. And they were able to continue selling at a normal pace by using their telephones and hiring in COVID-safe transporters to help them. Another area that we've been focusing on is safety in wet markets and hygiene and basic behavior change for the populace. Now, food isn't in itself a COVID vector or a challenge for COVID. It's when you bring people together in the COVID situation, or you have to keep the social distance, and this makes challenges within these supply chains. So we've been pushing a lot in the market to avoid transmission, wearing masks. It's ultimately extremely important, and Her Excellency, the Prime Minister, has recently put out a guidance on appropriate usage of masks and public usage of masks, which I think is a great positive. We've been monitoring poverty in the food consumption, prices in urban markets and that sort of thing, and certainly mobilizing resources, as my colleague Asif has mentioned, working on early recovery. And we dare say recovery at this point. We haven't moved past COVID yet, but we have to start thinking about how do we help the rural population and urban populations recover from this. And so having this increasing demand, which will increase the supply of agriculture products, I think is extremely important. Now within this, they also have a challenge of feeding themselves. So you look at the interrelatedness of the health response and the food security response is extremely important at this point in time. So these are just a few points that I would make. There's a lot more that we're doing, and we're carrying on our normal business practices, but I won't go into all of the details. But indeed, we're continue to work and support the government and the different stakeholders to ensure that they're reducing the impact of COVID on their daily lives.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Asif Saleh. Due to coronavirus, the income of about 74% of the families has decreased. And people are now shifting from Dhaka to rural area, unfortunately. What would be its consequences? How does government and private organization work to ensure social security? Mr. Asif.
Yeah. No, thank you. I think this is going to require a collective work from all of us. And I think I just want to echo the work that we are doing with Robert's team at FAO. I mean, this is one example where so many partners came together. I mean, this is FAO and BRAC are working together, but the Dhaka North City Corporation has come on board, the DGHS working, A2I working. So there's a great combination of government working with development partners and sort of social organizations. We are getting data analytic work supported by all these telecommunication companies, so Robi, Grameenphone, all of these people are working. So how do we target people in a much better way and essentially try to keep them home by giving food support and others? So this is just one example where we are trying to do as much as possible to support the government to reduce the sort of health impact of COVID-19.
Mr. Asif and Robert, now it's a time to get relief. We'll talk on more issues after a short break. দর্শক দেখছেন RTV নিয়মিত আলোচনা অনুষ্ঠান ForthRight। এই পর্যায়ে নিচ্ছি বিরতি, ফিরছি একটু পরেই। সে পর্যন্ত আমাদের সাথেই থাকুন। দর্শক, আবার আমন্ত্রণ ফোর্থরাইট অনুষ্ঠানে। আজকে কথা বলছিলাম দ্য ইম্প্যাক্ট অফ COVID-19 হিউম্যান সিকিউরিটি পার্সপেক্টস নিয়ে। ওয়েলকাম এগেইন বোথ অফ ইউ অ্যাট ForthRight. Mr. Robert, during this pandemic, how is FAO responding? What should government and private organization might do?
Yes, indeed. Well, as I mentioned before, FAO is responding at a global level to help monitor food prices, to help monitor food supplies and food stocks, and provide guidance through policy briefings on best practices in value chains and supply chains, in food production, in proper safety within the COVID context, and in terms of food production, social distancing and spacing. And I think that's a very relevant recommendation for the private sector, is to understand who their supply chains are coming from and how to protect those that are in their supply chain. So when you look at a farmer, who are the farmers they're buying from and the transporters, and making sure that those people in their supply chain should be protected. We've seen all around the world challenges when the companies aren't looking at the safety on the operations floor or in the processing plant, or however that COVID is oftentimes effectively spreaded without proper social distancing. These are all challenges that can be easily addressed through best practices or best behaviors. Now, the government, the recommendation is, again, very, very similar. Keep your supply chains open. Don't take protective strategies on a regional or global scale. Certainly promote the health aspect and its integrated relation to food security. And this comes down to mask wearing in public, proper hygiene of your food, which should be done anyhow. So when you're buying in the markets, take it home, make sure it's properly cleaned, that sort of thing. And it shouldn't be a vector of transmission. Something that's been done extensively is e-commerce. We may speak about this a little bit later, but I think e-commerce has been one of those growth areas when we're talking about increasing opportunities for employment and economic revenue, and this is really, it was always catching on, but it's been accelerated because of COVID-19.
Well, thank you.
Back to you.
Mr. Asif Saleh, before break, you were talking about lockdown. In your view, what will be the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 on Bangladesh?
Yes. No, I think, we had to make that calculation in terms of, I'm talking about Bangladeshi policymakers, that balance between lives and livelihood, essentially. So we had about 68 days of lockdown, and then the country now has opened up with various health restrictions in there. But essentially, as I was saying, that we need to overall, Bangladesh, there are so many different sides the impact has come in. Because Bangladesh is now more connected with the global market than ever. So on one hand, if you look at the global decline in the garments sort of market in the West, has led to reduction of orders, and that has led to layoffs in the garments factories in Bangladesh. So there is that unemployment challenge for a lot of these women and male garment workers. That's on one hand. Then the sort of the expatriate workers, who are one of the biggest source of our GDP, they are basically also coming back in huge numbers. So that implication is already there, and we are going to see that in the coming months. We haven't seen the reduction in remittances as yet. Up until last month, the remittance numbers were very good, but the experts are saying that this is the sort of almost the last batches people are sending, and they're also going all out to support their families. So that's why we have seen an increase in remittance number, but that number also will start to decline. So essentially, those are the external factors. And internally, I think what we are seeing in the urban economy and some of the rural economy, that I am more hopeful that, with the economy more gradually opening up, we will see a quicker recovery. And in the rural areas, what we are seeing from our microfinance operation is that this month has been very, very good, both in terms of people borrowing money and also returning money, because they are also in that spirit of that we are restarting and they need support in the early days to restart, resume their businesses. And so the indications are that most small businesses are about running 30 to 40% below capacity, or and the trends are positive. So I think we are, if this continues and there are no much worse health outcome, it's tied to the economy as well. So, and if there is no further lockdown that we in the coming days, then we are we can hope that we're going to see a quicker economic sort of recovery, hopefully. I mean, fingers crossed. Let's put it this way.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Rabat, due to COVID-19 pandemic, Bangladesh Dairy Farmers Association estimates around 90% of milk unsold. How does FAO help our dairy farmers to overcome this crisis? Do you have any special program for them?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that was an extreme challenge, almost insurmountable for those farmers at that point in time. A lot of that has started to evolve since the extended holiday has been lifted. Commerce is now moving. A lot of that was impacted because there was no transport, and Bangladesh is in a very challenged spot right now where they're dealing with 1 million Rohingya in the south. They've just dealt with the cyclone Amphan that's come through. Now there's extreme flooding, which will probably extend well into August, and then COVID on top of all this. So it's difficult to differentiate the crises between them on the economy at this point. But FAO has been working very closely with the World Bank and the Department of Livestock Services. The Department of Livestock Services will roll out an extensive program on cash for dairy farmers to help them deal with some of the challenges that they're faced with. FAO has been working particularly in the flooding areas in the north. In the longer term, the UN as a whole is working on what we call the SocioEconomic Recovery Framework. And this has been developed hand in hand with the different UN agencies and also with the government and different stakeholders through a number of different consultations. But essentially, there's 5 pillars to this. Pillar 2 is focused on education, health and nutrition, food security, and supply chains, as well as a handful of other things. Pillar 3 is focused on employment, micro, small, and medium enterprises, and migration. And so there's solid strategies that are based on the last 3 months of assessment to help with a longer-term recovery in this process.
Well, thank you. We are almost end of the program. Any final thought both of you want to share with our viewers? Mr. Asif Saleh.
I should say that I have a lot of hope and trust and confidence on the people of Bangladesh. But we don't seem to be getting any break this year because, as Robert was mentioning, that after the pandemic there was the super cyclone and now we have this flood.
One after another.
Just coming back and forth. But as I was saying, that just to look at the sort of the numbers that we are seeing in microfinance and others, and also agriculture, we also have a seeds enterprise. We see that people already have restarted their activities, right? I mean, they are fighting back. So I just want to basically mention that and want to end in hope that we have crisis, we have bad news, but at the same time, we have a very resilient group of people. As a nation, we will fight this back with our sort of own local solution, local resources, community coming together. And I think this is a crisis that the government cannot handle by themselves. So they also need to bring all these different stakeholders together, the private sector, the social sectors like us, and the development partners, and which we have seen to some extent in the crisis response. And we want to play this role, continue to play this role in the coming days as we talk about early recovery. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, Mr. Rabat, any final thought you want to share with our viewers?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to leave just a couple messages. And I agree that Bangladesh, the people of Bangladesh are probably the most entrepreneurial people I've ever seen on the planet. So congratulations to you. I'm sure that they will eventually overcome this, but it's going to be hard work along the way, I agree. My first message is that food is not a vector for transmission of the virus. Protect yourself, understand the cleaning of food and how to manage food in the supply chains, and we will not see a food challenge in the long term. Second, promote comprehensive social protection that targets the poorest of the poor. And again, Barack has put together a very comprehensive understanding of the poverty challenges and who needs the greatest support. Third is knowledge. Make sure that the population of Bangladesh have enough knowledge to adequately protect themselves. Well, what does it mean to social distance, the protocol for wearing your mask, et cetera, et cetera. And the last one is economic transition. We need to be able to adapt to this economically. And this transition is taking place. We see it in the agriculture sector of how, there's an increase in mechanization, increase in need for agro-processing, et cetera. We need to train people to adapt to this and to move forward in a stronger economy as they come out of this challenge with the virus. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a great joy to be here today.
Thank you very much indeed, Robert Simpson and Asif Saleh. Appreciated for joining with us. দর্শক ব্র্যাকের এক সমীক্ষায় বলা হয়েছে গেল কয়েক মাসে ফেরত আসা অভিবাসী শ্রমিকের 87% কোনো আয় নেই। 3 মাসের বেশি চলতে পারবেন মাত্র 33%। অবশিষ্টরা সরকারি সাহায্য ছাড়া চলতে পারবেন না। এমনটি বলছে সংস্থাটি। আর বিশেষজ্ঞরা বলছেন কোভিড-19 এমন এক দীর্ঘমেয়াদী সংকটের ইঙ্গিত দিচ্ছে যেখানে কোনো একক দেশের পক্ষে একঘরে হয়ে সবকিছু সামাল দেওয়া সম্ভব হবে না। করোনার মতো মহামারী মোকাবেলায় একে অপরের প্রতি নির্ভরশীলতা ভবিষ্যতে আরও বৃদ্ধি পাবে, যার সাথে একমত পোষণ করেছেন আজকের অতিথিরা। তবে পারস্পরিক এই নির্ভরশীলতার আদলে বিশ্বায়নের ইতিবাচক পরিবর্তন ঘটুক, সেই প্রত্যাশায় শেষ করছে আজকের অনুষ্ঠান। এতক্ষণ সঙ্গে থাকার জন্য ধন্যবাদ সবাইকে।
For more updates, subscribe and press the bell icon on YouTube app and never miss another update.